Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Chai Time. We are really glad that all of you guys are joining us and hope you guys are doing well. So, I'm your host, Arena, and today I'm here with Adnan. Adnan is the CEO of our company, OpusAI. Adnan, welcome to Chai Time. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Started working out lately, so it is, yeah, I'm doing
Oh,
fine.
nice.
Yeah. And also we have a really special guest with us today, Imad Jafri. Imad, welcome to Chai Time. We are really glad that you're joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Imad is a public speaker. He is somebody who also works in the tech field. And other than that, he also has a keen interest in how AI and technology can, be used to maximize social outcomes. So we will be talking to Imad in our creator segment, but first, let me just tell you all the topic that we're gonna talk about today. So it is related to AI and education. So the topic is, can AI make traditional education a thing of the past? So first off, I'm going to start questioning Adnan. So my question to Adnan would be, what is your opinion on the topic, and do you think that AI can, fundamentally transform the educational landscape?
Oh boy, it's a touchy subject because education institute, or at least the traditional education institute, get slightly anxious when we talk about AI and remapping the uh, education, how it is being taught today. Um, but I would say it's already being done. Like I mean, not even if we don't accept it, it is happening right now, right here. Every single day we're moving inching closer and closer to a future in which um, institutions will have a very different role than they believe they do today. It's still not something that anybody's publicly willing to accept, but that is where we're heading, where uh, again, and I'm not saying that education institution won't have a role, but the role will be very different than um, we believe it is today.
Okay. And a lot of people have this, question that, oh, okay, with AI and everything, technology being in the mainstream media, what would in, 10 years from now, in a decade, what would the classrooms look like? So what is your opinion on that?
What does the classroom look like? What does the classroom look like today compared to, let's say, classroom from 10 years ago or 15 years ago or 20 years ago? So I'll talk about a little bit about what classroom looked like when I was growing up. Right. So our classrooms were um, what today is likely going to be considered something from ancient past, right? Basically you have a bag filled with a bunch of paper books and paper notebooks, sharpeners, pencils, and a whole bunch of other things. And I think people still probably maybe carry most of these things, but they don't use it the way that we used to use, because for us it was like a mandatory. If you don't forget anything, it's not gonna your day is not gonna go well, right? Of course, we had physical tools most of the time. If you're in mathematics, then you're gonna have these entire geometry box in which trigonometry related utensils, and um, there will be no absolutely zero concept of anything digital, right? Everything has to be done on paper. Everything has to be repeated. Right? Now, fast forward to now, um, right? Let's say 5 years from now, what did we see change from there to here? Every child has a phone, of course, and even in school where phone is like being frowned upon, and is some school initially at least went try to outright ban it. It didn't work. Why didn't it work? Because that's part of the organic transformation that happened, right? And which incidentally also means, so In our days, it would be like, if you're, you know, cheating an exam, it would mean a very different thing than what would we consider cheating today, right? Today, it would simply like you open, uh, you know, pop-up window and you think about that. In our days, it would be something like, you wrote something on your hands, or you have some
Yeah.
secret sheet hidden in your trousers or something, right? So things have changed a lot, right? And what would the future we look like now? There's a lot of talk already about that traditional, um, what is being taught in school, or what is being more importantly assessed in school by the time you're done, is not really relevant to an employer of today. In employment, um, I'll talk about ourselves, for example. Like, when you come, we know that anything that you learn in school is obsolete, um, and obsolete to a degree that it's actually harmful to us, right? So we have to start from scratch in most cases. The only skill that we do value are skills that you didn't learn at school, which in most cases are related to something you did yourself, right? Learning how to effectively use, let's say, a computer, learning how to research different topics, learning how to learn new things, right? So these are the things that we actually value. Anything that you learned in school or college, not really relevant to us at all, right? In fact, like, in most cases, we have to really fight against, like, that, oh no, this is not something that, we do.
Yeah.
So that is already here. Now, what do we see in the future? I think in the future, what we see is that um, acceptance of this, right? Right now, when I say, go on a forum and say it openly, there's a lot of resistance, even from people who know this to be true, right? But they feel that somehow there's a sacred code that is being violated somehow. But I think that in a generation, this is going to change as well, where there's going to be a broad acceptance that, okay, this is not the role that institutes actually play in uh, in education, and we still have to determine what exactly is the role that they do play. But it's not definitely not going to be um, assessing or teaching skills. I think that mostly is going to be um, outsourced, or somehow, like, go out of the reach of institutions.
Okay. And lately, in the last few years, recently, people have been very, concerned about whether AI will take jobs, and will people be losing their jobs. So, do you think that in this sort of field, would teaching be eliminated because of AI?
Teaching as a job, will it be eliminated? So I think there's a new world that is being the world is being reshaped, and especially it's more true in education than anywhere else, because that's where we see a very, this early impact happening, right? So if you don't know what is happening in the US currently, a lot of these very large school districts, which used to employ literally hundreds of thousands of teachers, contractors, subs, they're laying off a lot of people. And those are basically like, government employees that are being laid off. And why is it happening? Now, there's a lot of talk about, oh, because of AI, or because of this, or because of that. But my take on that is that this is the sign of the world to come. What parents are feeling and seeing is that they don't they're not getting much out of the traditional schooling system, and which in result is what is happening here, because in US is like, usually, especially when it comes to education, it's slightly further than the rest of the world, and then later it spreads. And the example would be, there are a lot of different examples, but the modern education as we know it, it did spread out from the Western countries to the rest of the world, um, is homeschooling is on the rise, um, and which basically means is that parents are choosing either to keep their children home and educate them themselves, or alternatively there are these really small, which almost makes me feel 30, 40 years in the past in Pakistan, where you would every single corner you would turn, you would see a random school that is has 20, 30 children that are being taught, right? And I don't know if that's still the case there, but here it's almost like this. There are no boards or anything, but most parents feel that the traditional schools are doing more harm than they are doing good, which incidentally means that they have to take matters in their own hand, which also incidentally means is that they have to look at what is it that they want their children to learn. And I think a lot of courage on their part, because schooling or educating a child is a lot of work, comes from the fact that AI is in the mix. So they don't have to do everything from scratch. A lot of things that they don't know, they can quickly find answers. And it's almost like an assistant that is constantly at their disposal, that is helping them um, along the path of educating their children.
Yeah, and recently I saw a post that the kids nowadays, the middle schoolers, instead of sometimes if you're calling your teacher, you'd say mom. They are saying Alexa. So that was something that I was very shocked to see that, oh, okay, they are really involved with technology. Recently, like they would be asking Alexa, Google, what these sort of things. So I was
That's definitely a thing, right? Because more you interact with technology, the more it becomes almost like part of your life. So yeah, of course, we're gonna see a lot more of that, um, and that's definitely part of it, right? That if you always have some kind of help available readily, then it almost like feels like a chore to go to the traditional, or think about the traditional education system, because that is so slow and cumbersome, and out of place in right. So yeah.
yeah. And do you think with AI, the focus could shift from acquiring degrees to skills?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Like with AI being a part of education system, people would be more focused on getting skills, acquiring new skills instead of just getting degrees and chasing that.
um so you're so let me, I think there are two questions there, right? So right now, um the undercurrent is, and it's not something that, again, like initially I said, that people haven't really accepted this fact that traditional educational systems are not educational systems. They are something else, and nobody's so for now they're not willing to assign a label to what exactly are they. But to most parents, they want their children to have a degree, not because they think it's gonna help them learn anything, but because they don't want to be the one um, who didn't equip their child with every single tool or every single um, um, document that they would need in the future, right? Now, you're saying whether it will be more skill oriented than degree oriented. I think it's going to be hybrid, right? Degrees are pieces of paper, but those pieces of paper are still required to make your way through the bureaucracy, right? So most of the private enterprises, they have moved beyond degrees. They don't care about your degree. Ourselves, for example, like we actually don't care at all. When you come in, we never even check if you have a degree, right? Um, However, if you want to go abroad, if you want to apply for anything government related, if you want to get a research grant, all these things are still tied to a piece of paper, which is the degree. Which means that if you don't have that piece of paper, then you are at a disadvantage. And I think it will take a some realization at the bureaucratic and the governmental level, that they are excluding a lot of people because of that private club, which is the degree club, basically, right? And a lot of those people are actually the people who would build really cool technologies that then after that they no longer are at least sold on um, a lot of things that government does want to sell them on, right? So it's becoming almost like a there's a divergence there happening, right? And this is something, a side story would be that this is something that I encountered personally as well, where I see, because that's what happened, right? Government institutions or government departments, they think that whenever they want to do something, bring in innovation, they go to the academia, and private players already know academia has nothing. They don't have anything to contribute to the innovation, right? And what happens is that they take a whole bunch of people who have very fat degrees and knows a lot of jargons and employ them and say, okay, go and uh, innovate, right? Like they think this is a magic powder that they can sprinkle and it's gonna start some kind of technological revolution. But what that does is that those people actually become bureaucrats, and they become an obstacle, um, in form of bringing more regulation and doing some really silly things that actually hampers. And we already have seen this, like in the last 20 years, 25 year, we have seen this happen in the EU, like European Union. That's really what they did, and what it caused is that at this point, their technological, um, anything that could have happened actually went in negative, and now they're struggling to accept this, right? Of course, they're calling it that no, 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 something else is at play, but the truth is that that's what the reason, right? And so, what the point that I'm trying to get to is that there needs to be some acceptance at the governmental level that okay, this needs to change. This education system is not really. So this is already happening. I would think.
Okay. And do you think with AI being a part of the education system and a lot of people using AI for a lot of things, do you think it can hinder our critical thinking skills? Because I remember when they launched ChatGPT, a lot of the time before we used to make assignments and the kids used to think about it and write there, do their own research. But since ChatGPT was launched, kids started to rely on it a lot more. And then what it would do is it would get a lot of plagiarism for them, and it would be the same sort of arguments again and again. So, do you think that it can hinder our critical thinking skills?
Tools like ChatGPT, of course, they already are, right? So because they are not truly AI tools, they are more like, how to put it, and you brought it up yourself that they are the same. They come up with the same argument, right? True AI actually does not do that, right? True AI is more personalized. It helps you in so plagiarism. If you see plagiarism, then it's not really AI. It's something kind of like um, I would say wannabe, or like on that on the transitional path of AI, right? And that's something that at this point, after we're hearing a lot of noise around these tools and how they're going to revolution everybody's realizing that they're not actually true artificial intelligence. They're more like um, um, beyond the marketing buzz. They're not living up to the hype that is being claimed, right? So these tools are hampering, and these tools are not the only one that are hampering. Of course, like when calculators first came about, that was the same argument that children no longer know how to manually calculate, um, from scratch, facts and figures, like especially mathematics, they can't calculate anymore. um, so that was a definitely a thing at a topic. In this specific case, however, it's not just hampering the critical thinking skills, it's actually hampering the communication skills that children develop at an early age, right? So, um, is it because of AI? No, it is because of introducing tools that are poorly built, um, and not really well developed, um, and introducing them to young minds, right? That's not what you want to do, right? Especially when it comes to children, you want to be very careful when you introduce any kind of tool to them, right? Of course, you don't want to give a gun to a baby, that would be nonsense. But even any other tools, you want to be careful so it doesn't hamper their uh, mental development. And that's something, that's a conversation that we need to have more of, or rather than regulating AI. That's the thing that we need to talk about. How do we integrate artificial intelligence to human society without uh, becoming dumber and dumber because of it, right? So um, true AI, I think, is more akin to an assistant, right? In which case it actually teaches you a lot more, and it works in a way. So let me give you an example what I would consider true AI and what I would consider this generative kind of tools, right? A generative tool is that you ask something in ambiguous terms and it gives you something that looks very clever, but on the surface, but is actually no matter what you ask, like, close to those ambiguous question, is always going to give you something very similar, right? And you'll be able to, as a human, be able to tell that it's very same. It's not very different from what was said before. And that's what we see with these um, AI tools that in any in a broad category of questions, it always give you very similar answers, right? And it's, on the surface, it looks very clever, but it's not. It doesn't have any diversity. It doesn't have any insight into what is being asked, right? A true AI would actually be something that if you ask it as question, it does not concentrate on the broad ambiguity of what is being asked, but rather it tunes into the specifics of what is being asked. And we as humans, like, we have this ability which is called attention to details, right? Not focus on the keywords, right? So um, that's what I would say. And again, like, even then, if you have true AI, we still need to be careful when we introduced it, at what age, at what class, and how do we make it that it benefits the person, not hampers their learning ability, right? um, with the current way how we're introducing it blindly and without any regards, it is definitely hampering more than the critical thinking skill. It is hampering communication skills, which which is not something that you want to do.
Yeah. And before we move towards the creator segment, anybody who wants to ask a question, they can just write it in the chat box and we'll answer it. So, moving towards the creator segment, Imad, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good too. And how has your week been so far?
Uneventful. I think not much happening apart from work this week.
Okay. That seems fine too. Okay, so my first question to you would be, what do you think could be the risk of AI-driven decisions in terms of education?
Well, I think the first thing to understand is that AI then responds necessarily to the machine learning model that you give it, as well as to the data set that you give it. So if you don't filter out the implicit biases in the data set, then the AI is going to reflect those biases as well, right? For example, if you want to decide where to allocate funding and you decide to do it according to areas where there are already educational outcomes, where there are already high educational outcomes, then the artificial intelligence model might recommend that you continue to fund those areas, even though perhaps the true reason for that educational output could simply be that those areas are already well funded. So it's important for anyone who's applying artificial intelligence to ensure that their own data set is free from those kinds of issues, that they're cognizant of those kinds of issues. I think the range of decisions that artificial intelligence could involve itself in is quite immense, i.e., you could use artificial intelligence to design testing and curriculum outcomes, to design like university admissions, interviews, student feedbacks, etc., etc. all of these possibilities are open. But the risks then come into, firstly, I think, whether or not you're able to criticize or hold the AI model accountable, i.e., I think what's likely, or what's possible rather, is that individuals who set up AI to drive those kinds of education decisions are willing to perhaps absolve themselves of any responsibility of the outcomes, and to simply say that, well, oh, the AI made this decision, therefore it must be uh, the maximum, or this must be the optimal decision to make. So I think that's one potential risk. The second risk, I think, is that artificial intelligence, the implementation of it could end up being quite unequal, i.e., areas or countries even that are already more wealthy are going to implement AI into their education a lot more rapidly than countries or districts or areas that are poorer. And then AI, although this is not necessarily a fault of the artificial intelligence model itself, it's likely that it's possible that AI then exacerbates or sort of widens those inequalities that already may exist. And I think, thirdly, that even if, let's say, you've accounted for those kinds of inequalities and those kinds of issues within the data set, what you end up often needing is that you still need like a human perspective or a human touch to decide whether or not the AI's decisions should be carried out. I.e., the AI might recommend decisions based on certain kinds of outcomes, even consistently learning what those outcomes might be. Um, but you might still need, let's say, a council of like a team of human experts or a team of like human counselors to decide whether that particular decision is in line with things that we in general value, i.e., an AI might tell you to sort of, disqualify, let's say, a student simply because of their educational sort of performance, but a human counselor would be able to better understand the personal circumstances of that student, for example. And this is, I think, an analogy that could apply across even on larger scales. So even if you have AI driven decisions, I think it's still important to have like a human team that is able to filter through those decisions as well.
Yeah, I think so too. That even if you have AI models, you would still need humans to kind of, be the ones in control in a lot of things, and with empathy to, making sure that the students are doing well and all those sort of things. I think humans are really necessarily needed. And other than that, I have another question, which is, do you think AI can, personalize education for students from diverse backgrounds? What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think AI can go pretty far in trying to do that. So I think the clearest example that's in my head is of distance learning. So distance learning, which we saw sort of become a norm during COVID pandemic. Um, Oftentimes it was in the form of like lectures, videos, asynchronous videos and lectures and those kinds of things, which were perhaps over time, especially for younger students, not as engaging. But what artificial intelligence can do if you merge it with distance and virtual learning is that it can set up more responsive platforms. It can set up more, let's say, specific testing curriculums or testing outcomes for individuals who are participating in distance learning. And I think the kinds of people for whom virtual or distance learning might still be really relevant is like people from like more poorer backgrounds who can't access the kinds of schooling or facilities that perhaps they otherwise should or otherwise deserve, or even individuals with like physical and physical disabilities or mental disabilities who can't perhaps uh, participate in regular schooling the same way. So for them, distance learning might become useful, and then artificial intelligence could become an essential tool in amplifying that. And I also think in other ways, language, and oftentimes students struggle because the medium of instruction within a school is in a language that they're not very comfortable with or they're not very familiar with. So if artificial intelligence is able to bridge that gap in terms of whether it's using translation options or whether it's using language simplification, and it's whether it's able to um, simply summarize issues or content in a way that's more applicable to students or understandable for students, I think that would allow more diverse individuals to sort of be able to access it. And I think even that in the question of what those teaching materials look like, so I think fundamentally backgrounds of students affect the way in which they learn best. It affects the way in which the time they learn best, the manner in which they learn best, the way that they're best communicated with. All of these things, one, I think an AI model would be good at understanding, i.e., an AI model could best understand what perhaps the situation of a particular student is and how exactly it is that those teaching methods should conform to those. Perhaps, and it'd be able to do it faster than like a human counseling team would. um, and then potentially modify teaching materials according to the needs of those kinds of students.
Yeah, I think it proved to be a really cool tool when we were in COVID times, and it was something that everybody could facilitate, could take that sort of facilitation and um, benefit from. And last question to you, which is, do you think AI be able to empower a student's educational autonomy?
Right. So I think this is really one of the more exciting potential applications of AI. And I think the starting point of this discussion would just be that our AI is able to significantly increase the amount of teaching materials that you can offer to students, which, in my opinion, consequently significantly increases the amount of courses, subjects, lesson plans, etc., that you can offer to students. So if a school has a certain set of teachers, they can only offer a certain set of subjects. But if they're assisted by AI within their teaching or within their curriculum development, then they're able to perhaps offer a greater degree and diversity of subjects and courses alongside that, right? And I also think what that does is allows autonomy. I think is tied to being able to having all the information you need to be able to make decisions about what you want to study. So if an artificial intelligence model is able to, let's say, accompany the student as their, let's say, in a way, personal counselor, is able to, let's say, monitor a student's progress over a period of time, monitor the way in which they engage with a particular class or with the set of lessons, then it's going to be able to recommend to them perhaps certain subjects over time. Perhaps in later years of their high school, it might be able to better recommend to them what potential degrees or subjects or skills to pursue within, let's say, even tertiary education within university or college, etc. Simply because now it has the kind of information that would be very difficult for a human person or human counselor to be able to track, because like compiling information over years, etc., to understand how is it that the person functions. So if it's able to give that information to a student, oftentimes you go into university feeling like you don't know what you want to do. But if the AI is able to better explain to you what it is that you might want to do, I think it then expands the amount of autonomy you have there. And I also think that oftentimes the gripe that students have with, like, courses, subjects in school, college, university, whatever, is just that the way in which they're being taught is not one that perhaps appeals to them, or the appeals to the way that they best learn. So I think what AI can do is it can modify the teaching materials according to the preferences of those students. It can, let's say, a student is more of a visual learner, so AI can take the same material that a teacher has provided it, because again, a teacher is perhaps limited in their capacity to provide different forms of those teaching materials. But the AI takes those materials, turns them into, let's say, diagrams, turns them into videos, turns them into any other kind of perhaps content that would allow the student to absorb it better. So that kind of autonomy would be one in which the student is able to control the way in which they assimilate information. And I think that could go quite a bit in allowing students to sort of achieve their educational goals in terms of feeling as if they're absorbing the material, understanding the content, responding to the questions appropriately, things like that.
Yeah. And thank you so much, Imad, for giving us your insights on this topic. And before we could wrap up, I would like to ask Adnan for any key takeaways that he would like to share as well.
Yeah, I mean, education is a great use case for us, and we've been thinking about it for a very long time, for personal reason, but also for how we see it being evolved from what it was to what it is today, and how it's being evolved further. But more importantly, because we believe that having more skilled people really helps us reach our mission, the mission that we're on. It requires a lot more skillful people, which, as we already talked about, is not something that we see educational system that cause is not being served by traditional education at all, right? So that's something that we um, have to constantly think about, and it's a constant ongoing topic within the company and within our private household as well. Um, so fascinating, how it's evolving, and I think it's going to evolve a lot before um, we see it settle down. And what I see it uh, going towards is um, less of, I would say, the mundane, repetitive things, and more of an experiential system where um, we almost dive into kind of an interactive world, right, every single day. And whether it's remote or local, that's a different, secondary thing. But something that helps us rapidly um, learn, right? Think of it as like, if you've watched The Matrix, like, how Neo learns, right? Literally things are being programmed directly into his or downloaded into his brain. So it's something very similar. And we know from experience that um, personally facing a problem helps you learn way faster than just a teacher going over some kind of curriculum. That's a much slower way to learn, and a much easier something that you forget much and anything that you experience personally that impacts you. So that's what I believe that is going to happen. We're going to see more of the um, experiential classrooms um, in the future. When it's yet to be seen, but what we're doing is we're trying to make it happen much faster than anybody think they can happen.
Okay. And Imad, would you like to share some key takeaways that you might have?
No, I wanted to add. I think that the way in which AI is perhaps sort of captivating industry is extremely important, and I think with education, given the importance that education in particular holds, I think like education is like the primary mechanism for any set of individuals to, let's say, make a better life for themselves, improve their own standard of living, etc., but also become useful, productive members of any society or any country. Um, the way in which AI can do so is, I think, potentially a double-edged sword. Like we discussed, the risks of education, risks to education of AI-driven decisions, but at the same time, the kind of leaps or the ways in which AI can perhaps advance the standard and the baseline that we have of education. Like just a reference to what Mr. Adnan said, that when calculators came, people were like, "Oh, the children won't be able to do math anymore." But an entirely new way of thinking about education came about, where we said the children don't need to learn necessarily how to do specific multiplications and divisions. We're going to test them on a bunch of other things instead, so they can use the calculator for help within those things. So I think AI is going to challenge the ways that we think of education and the way that we think of what an educated person should be. And I think like educational institutes should be open to the possibility that AI is definitely going to challenge their conventional notions.
Yeah. And a huge thanks to Adnan for giving us his insights on this topic. And special thanks to Imad as well for joining in, for giving us his opinion and his insights as well. It was really a very interesting sort of session discussing these things with you guys. And before we go away, we would like for everybody who has joined in to go check out the Opus website. Our pre-sale is live, and everybody, all of you guys, I hope that you guys have a good weekend and a great day today. So, bye bye, everybody.
All right, bye bye.